Hashtag psychotherapy unfogged with Mark Fielding.
Hello, welcome to Series 6, Episode 4 of Hashtag Psychotherapy Unfogged. As our regular listeners will know, we're talking today on a subject that is very, very close to my heart and I address in every single series, so important. Today, I have the absolute pleasure to interview Gary Evans, Director and Co-founder of the Forest Bathing Institute. Gary is a peer-reviewed author and researcher on the health benefits of forest bathing. The World Economic Forum has appointed Gary and his wife as winning top innovators. Gary pioneered forest bathing alongside his wife Olga. Between them, they have led hundreds of woodland therapy sessions for the general public, healthcare professionals, NHS staff, DEFRA, Natural England, Forestry England, county councils, and world experts in nature therapy. Forest bathing can significantly improve your well-being, according to recent research from the University of Derby. The results showed a statistically significant improvement across 12 key well-being well-being areas. Gary regularly consults with the government, universities, healthcare providers, wildlife charities, and national landowners. Gary is regularly quoted in the national and international press and featured in countless publications, including The Guardian and Telegraph. His media appearances include BBC TV, BBC Earth, ITV, BBC Radio, and print. So it's a real pleasure to have you on, Gary. Nice to meet you. Um,
Be
so,
here.
so maybe we could kick off and ask you a massive question. Tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you became involved in such an important area.
The short version of a long story is that in my early 30s, so around year 32, 33, I was definitely depressed and very low.
Okay.
I wasn't clinically diagnosed, but I wasn't in the best of places. And then I found yoga, yin yoga in particular, which is a very mindful version. So the opposite to what you'll find in most gyms, which is vinyasa flow, which is very muscular. The yin yoga is very meditative. So you hold the postures 3 to 5 minutes. So that changed my life. And yeah, within within the space of 9 months, I started to explore my passions and what I was interested in more, which led to traveling between 100 and 200,000 miles around the planet, always interested in life's existential questions.
Mm.
I mean, I was low because I felt like I wanted to help people, but I had no idea what my role in the world was at the start of all of this.
Mm.
So I have a great interest in ancient cultures and ancient civilizations. So it led to me launching a new career as a literary agent for a lot of the authors you'd see on History Discovery Channel about ancient cultures, ancient wisdom, ancient history. I was a tour guide to the pyramids. I spent about 6 months in Egypt, going up and down the Nile. Almost 6 months in Egypt inside pyramids and temples. That's pretty much all exclusively what I did. Went in the Great Pyramid and meditated sort of 25 to 30 times, taking various different people in there. We used to hire it for our tour groups for very long meditations, life-changing experiences. And had similar things happening. Yeah, I was organizing tours to Machu Picchu. Yeah, went through Mexico, Guatemala, got caught up in a 7.4 earthquake on the Guatemala Mexico border. But where I got to, alongside spending a lot of time admiring the art in Egypt, just very graceful and beautiful art of ancient Egypt that really spoke to me. But the message I got from studying the philosophy of ancient Egypt was look into nature to understand yourself, look into nature to understand your own nature. And alongside this, I was reading a lot of the ancient Indian philosophy because of my interest in yoga and meditation. I mean, the combination of ancient Indian philosophy and spending time in ancient sites meditating is a beautiful combination. So I recommend any listeners to combine those two. So whether it's Avebury, Stonehenge, where I was also a tour guide, or any of the smaller sites across the UK, Europe, etc. And so I actually developed a speciality in archaeoacoustics during this whole period. So because the study of sound at ancient sites, which is why I was looking at some of your other interviewees, because we had some incredible experiences using sound in some of the ancient sites, and I was talking to world-leading expert at Stanford about acoustics, and you can say altered states of consciousness or altered perception, different frames of mind, different viewpoints on the world. I mean, however you want to look at it, there's different ways to change our perception, and sound is a gentler way as well as meditation and these type of things. There are obviously other things you can do as well. So I was interested actually that this academic, because she'd experienced sound at a lot of the sites, was also interested in the sort of the more profound dimensions of it. It wasn't I just went to her to discuss the academic side. But along the way, I found Olga, my wife, who was studying philosophy at King's College, and she was reading like the Vedas and ancient Sanskrit for her course, and I was reading it for my work and pleasure. And on our I increasingly developed an interest in ancient forests and ancient woodland, because when I wasn't outside the country, I realized that when I was in ancient woodland near some like big old oak trees, 300 years plus, that actually the ambience around an old oak tree is not too dissimilar to some of these ancient sites.
Interesting.
So the quality of my meditation inside an Egyptian temple, I could certainly get into very profound states of meditation more easily than sitting inside. So this is the difference. Inside, I can get myself into places with my experience because I'm a meditation teacher now. So I increasingly got interested in going to ancient forests when I was in England and traveling. And so I Googled what are the health benefits of ancient trees, because there was clearly something happening to me, but I had no framing for it. I mean, what is happening? Why am I able to be more peaceful in the presence of an ancient oak or an ancient yew tree? Why is the quality of my meditation different than inside the house? And that was where I found the science of forest bathing popped up. So from Professor Lee in Japan and many of the others, and I do like numbers. So as a meditation teacher, a yoga teacher, a sound therapist, and as a forest bathing guide, I like it to be on a firm foundation so I can explain it logically to people to hopefully encourage them to give it a go and get some of the benefits that I've been enjoying. So when I found the physiological science behind the health benefits of nature in Japan, I mean, I was absolutely thrilled. Someone's got the numbers.
It confirmed what you'd felt.
Someone's got the numbers. This is what it was obviously the tip of an iceberg, which it still is what's been done. So we're now at the front because we're in touch with about 100 universities. We're now at the front of next steps. But because you've got the numbers, that was why the Japanese government got increasingly interested, and they scaled it to sort of 3 million people plus a year. Similar things have now happened in South Korea, and so my wife and I on our honeymoon set ourselves the mission of getting to those numbers in the UK, and now increasingly we're working internationally. So there's a lot I could tell you about. There's a lot happening, so it's the most natural direction for us as a civilization.
Oh, Gary, I'm losing you a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, paused.
Yeah, it's
I don't know
okay.
if it's me or you. It
No,
is me.
I think it's you. It's okay. We can take that bit out. But I
Yeah.
probably missed the last 15 seconds.
What was the last thing you heard? Do you remember?
Yeah, you're talking about going to Japan and more recently South Korea, and then all of the research kind of confirming, I guess, everything you intuitively felt, and then the fact that the
Hmm.
area is just growing exponentially throughout the world. Basically, this is, I guess, what you found, and also in terms, I mean, just to go back and just look at some of the things you said, and it's so interesting to hear about your journey because it was underpinned really by a seeking. I guess, the spiritual seeking, some might say, traveling all through the world, everything that you've done, and then leading you
Hmm.
kind of back to nature almost, which is actually quite beautiful. I mean, I just wanted to ask you, what was it like to meditate in the Great Pyramid? I mean, I meditate as well. I've never meditated anywhere like that. I mean, what was that like? Can you hear me?
Yeah, so there
Yeah.
are reports of Napoleon spending the night inside the Great Pyramid, the King's Chamber. So it's well, when you go into deep meditation, I mean, I guess it depends what you need. I mean, I'll give you
Mm,
an example. So it's a place where you can get profound epiphanies.
yeah.
I mean, you go inside the Great Pyramid, um, when you have to climb up, and then you have to go through this little narrow passage. Then you get to the base of where they basically blasted through the rock, and the passageway, which I guess is about 30 meters straight up, but it's only about a meter tall. So you have to bend, like almost have your back flat. So you've only got the height of your legs.
Mm,
And then so you got to go up this very narrow bit completely bent over. And of course, it can get claustrophobic. I've had people do a U-turn and run,
mm, mm,
suddenly aware that there's millions of tons of stone above you.
yeah.
Um, so you go up, yeah, about 30 meters, and then it opens up into the Grand Gallery, which I
Mm,
think is 15 meters tall, something
wow.
like that. So there's
Amazing.
suddenly this massive space which
Mm,
feels like a cathedral type space. But from an acoustics perspective, the whole thing's very finely tuned to sound. So you
mm,
then have to continue climbing up. They put wooden staircase in, and you go up. I think it's another 30 or something meters until you get up to the king's chamber, which the father of Egyptology, Flinders Petrie, was very intrigued by. Because why did they build it? How they built it? Because they've basically built a chamber that's not locked into the extremities of the pyramid. So there's a chamber of this incredible granite that has acoustic properties
mm,
naturally anyway. And then there's a space, and then there's the limestone.
mm,
But underneath it, they've lifted it as well. So this chamber can actually vibrate. So it's not being dampened by the surrounding rock. And you say, well, why do they go to all the extra effort of doing that? Because that's a lot of extra work.
definitely.
Weaken it. I mean, it's just a whole the internal structure of the Great Pyramid is completely over-engineered for the purposes that we are told it was created as a tomb
Mm,
chamber. It
mm,
doesn't make any sense because the engineering that's done um, weakens the structure, and it's many, many, many orders of magnitude more complicated to build a pyramid
mm,
like that,
mm, yeah.
and make it easier to find the burial because you've created all this space inside the
Mm,
building.
mm,
So there's certainly questions there.
mm,
Um, but for a student of meditation, whatever the original purposes, which of course there are lots of questions are, but for the student of meditation now, it is somewhere that you can go for a very interesting meditation. That
Yeah.
we can say. And if you use sound, which can be used to change your perception, I'm not aware of a better place, because the engineering in Egypt is, so it was like the master builders were in Egypt. You can't put a cigarette paper between these 100-ton blocks,
Mm,
whereas the workmanship at Stonehenge in comparison is quite crude.
mm, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you tend to have a lot of gaps in the Neolithic chambers and things. But an example of the kind of epiphany that the Great Pyramid gave me is, yes, I went up, bent over, went up the first bit, got into the grand gallery where it suddenly gets very expansive, and then the epiphany was you've done very well, basically, in seeing that there is a lot of distractions in the world, and to understand, basically, to understand your true nature,
Mm,
you do need to be able to see past the distractions. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to enjoy a movie, but a movie is not all there is to life. And
mm,
yeah, so there's these things, obviously, that philosophers and students of
mm,
meditation have been trying to understand about themselves over the millennia.
mm,
So yeah, so it was this sort of felt sense that I was finding the right way for
mm,
myself.
mm.
But of course, just that by itself could be quite ego inflating. It's like, oh yeah, well done. So the next thing that comes
Mm,
in this epiphany was, so it's like, yeah, so well done. You are on the right track looking at
mm,
these type of interests and meditation and yoga and things of
yeah.
personal development
Yeah.
tools. And I guess I was interested in helping people as well, which I think is a critical thing. I mean, if we all make a decision to help others, it'd be quite a revolution on the planet.
It
So,
would. Yeah.
so that was stage one.
Mm,
But here comes the next bit,
mm,
and it was like I was standing at the base of a ladder, and so in my mind's eye, I can see this ladder that went off into infinity. So it was like the length of the ladder was basically the size of the universe, let's say. So it's just a ladder that went off
mm,
into infinity. So a far longer ladder than I could possibly grasp the
mm,
magnitude of the size of it.
mm,
So then it's, well done for seeing through the illusion.
mm,
Here is the potential of your growth, and
mm,
this is where you are.
mm.
Rung one on the ladder,
Yeah.
and that's the rest of your work.
Yeah. Oh wow, I mean, goodness me, so powerful. And then just kind of bringing it, just bringing it back to, the kind of, I mean, forest bathing, ecotherapy. I mean, there's lots of
Mm,
different names for this. Um, because I'm thinking Gary kindly sent me some papers which I read before our interview, and there's a link between mindfulness and forest bathing, being in nature, and also kind of compassion focused
mm.
meditation. And I wonder whether you could just tell our listeners a little bit about that, Gary. Listeners that may not really know that much about mindfulness, just what is the link in terms of mindfulness and being in nature and ecotherapy? Why do the two sit so well together?
So so forest bathing. So the beauty of the system for me and
Mm,
my wife is there's two really amazing
mm,
elements. One's the academic research, and the other is the technique,
yeah,
which of course you can teach and share
yeah,
the tools. So it's mindful sensory engagement with the environment.
yes.
However, mindful sensory engagement with the environment is basically what we do as children.
Mm,
So we're not teaching anything new as a forest bathing
mm,
guide, or anyone that leads these kind of mindfulness and nature
yeah,
sessions. If it's kids, and speaking as a father of a 4-year-old, that is how we are when we're young.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and the classic example is just bit like the child that says, "Oh, look, mummy, daddy, look at that butterfly," and the and the child is just in the present beauty. Butterflies are very beautiful, probably many colors, potentially sunlight glistening off the wings, and of course, yeah, you've got the movement, which is very interesting as well. So there's a lot going on to be focused on. So that's what we used to enjoy. Well, as it turns out, it's equally enjoyable, that method, as at any age. So we've had from 6 months to sort of 85 plus on our sessions, because in that moment, there is a sense of freedom.
Definitely.
You're not thinking about the difficult things with work or family, the challenges, or perhaps you've got some health things going on. Just in that moment, you're just absorbed into the moment and just present, and potentially can let go of stress. We can say it that way. So forest bathing for adults is a reminder of how we were when we were young, and of course, if we were lucky enough to spend time in nature, then potentially we've got a foundation to tap into. And if we were brought up in a city and didn't have a lot of nature exposure, then there's a whole beautiful, majestic world to explore, whether it's in a park, because we go into parks in the cities to help people, but the natural woodlands and the ancient woodlands, which is our speciality, are something altogether different. So that's a whole other topic. But the study that we did with the University of Derby and the University of Birmingham compared learning mindfulness indoors to picking up mindfulness outdoors in nature. And so the conclusion was that it's potentially easier to learn mindfulness in nature, and there could be it could be more accessible for people with a history of trauma, for example. Because mindfulness in an indoor setting, there tends to be a bigger or large internal focus, watching the breath coming and going. In the forest bathing, we don't need to do that. We can focus our attention on the trees, plants, the animals, the clouds, the colors, the sounds, the smells. So there's an external focus, which makes it quite unusual as an intervention in the first place, and potentially a gentler starting point for many people.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear you. Yeah, because I guess, mindfulness meditation can be contraindicated. If someone has a trauma experience, or or complex trauma, but like you say, it's the present moment awareness. It's which is so powerful, isn't it? I mean, to be to be anywhere and to click into present moment awareness. I mean, somewhat, some argue, and I think it is true. That is where we live our life, isn't it? Actually, in the present moment. Although our mind loves to do future and past, and but to do that in nature, there's so much going on, isn't there? I mean, I'm guessing it's probably, even if you're walking through a beautiful ancient wood and you're worrying about work, probably there's some health benefits. But I guess if you're walking through a really beautiful natural environment and you're actually present, the experience, I guess, could be, well, it would be a magnificent experience. I mean, it's just beautiful, isn't it? When you really connect with, being in nature, ancient wood. It's just, there's nothing like it, really. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could tell you about a lot of my experiences. I've run, circa 350 sessions. These days, it's mostly for government, media, and academics, NHS, etc. But some of the experiences that I've had with the groups in the forest would rank up there with that type of experience, level of epiphany that I described in the Great Pyramid. And I've certainly, one of the biggest epiphanies that I had about nature. Most people's relationship with a woodland or a forest is typically a plantation woodland. So if they pull a picture into their mind of what a forest looks like, it's lots of pine trees. That's the average relationship with nature, because that's what has been put across the country, because we're down to less than 2% of the actual natural woodland. That one hurts my heart.
Shocking.
But I've realized there are benefits to the plantations, but we do need to think of them. It's like going to pick up plants at a nursery. the trees are not in their natural setting. Like the Scots pines, I've been up to the Cairngorms. I know what a natural Scots
Cairngorm.
pine
Yeah.
wants to look like. They
Mm.
actually look a lot like yew trees. You get these amazing
Mm.
massive shapes. They're not straight columns.
Mm.
And the biggest, yeah, so the plantation woodlands are a bit like deserts for the biodiversity.
Yeah.
So they do not provide homes for as many, like an oak tree can have up to 2,000 other species living
Mm.
on an oak tree.
Wow, that's incredible.
So
Yeah.
yes, that's 2,000 individual species, but how many members of each species also live on a giant oak? So
Amazing.
they are like the cities of
Mm.
the forest. So of course, yeah, if you took the oaks away, what we lost. So there's a completely different feeling in
Mm.
ancient woodland.
Yeah.
There it is different visually because you've got a lot more mosses and lichens. So yeah,
Yeah.
bright greens. I mean, you get oranges, you get blacks, you get browns, and a
Yeah.
whole range of colours in those spectrums as well. Might even be some blues and
Mm.
things. The texture of the forest is different because all the old trees, typically, if it's quite a moist environment, are going to be covered in mosses and lichens. So the texture that you're looking at, it's not just a tree trunk brown. So it's got a whole load of other stuff going on. And then, of course, that puts a foundation in place for all of the insects and then the bird
Mm.
life and the animal
Mm.
life. And it makes your heart sing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've understood when I've just been standing in these places that a lot of people haven't been so fortunate to see them. There's parts of the country that have very little woodland at all.
Mm.
We lost a lot of it during the Second World War, and so there's certain parts of the country that don't have much woodland.
Mm.
Other parts of the country, most people will be visiting the plantations. The vast majority of people in the country have not seen what I've seen.
Mm.
And when I saw how the natural environment is how I mean as close as it can be. I mean even you it's hard to get back to these huge areas. The Cairngorms in
Mm.
Scotland's the biggest area
Yeah.
left, but in England we've got small pockets. But even those small pockets, how you relate to them, how you feel in them, and the beauty and the majesty of just observing it in a pristine or in a very beautiful condition. Um, I mean, it means more than I could describe with words.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I totally. I mean, my share a bit about my life. I mean, I lived in London for most of my life. I'm like 59 now. Moved to Suffolk to be closer to nature. About
Mm,
4 years ago, I walk in ancient wood every day, and do you know what? It's just I don't know. It's just life changing. I mean, I can wake up. We all wake up. I can wake up. I can feel a bit sketchy. I can take the dog, I can go for a walk, in a big, big ancient wood. I come out the other side of that wood, I just feel completely different. Really,
mm,
it's just beautiful, and it kind of brings me on to like social prescribing. So social prescribing, from my limited knowledge, is something that's been going on in Japan for years, isn't it? And probably South Korea as well. Is that coming a little bit more into the mainstream here in terms of medicine or not? I just wonder the medical model, is it embracing the benefits? Because the
mm-hmm.
benefits are clear, aren't they? It's all been researched. I'm just wondering what's the interaction between the kind of medical establishment here and forest bathing and all the benefits? Open,
Um,
closed?
all going in the right direction. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Okay.
we've consulted with more members of the NHS, like hundreds
Brilliant.
of members of the NHS, varying levels. I mean, so social prescribing. There's actually been a lot of momentum gained over the last few years. It's
Brilliant.
very regional based, but I'm connected to the country's major movers and shakers on LinkedIn. So yeah, so I'm getting all the latest
Right.
news. So social prescribing is increasingly being used across, certainly across England and Scotland are ahead of us as far as I'm aware in terms of
Right.
using nature.
Mm.
But yeah, so there's social prescribing and then there's green social prescribing, which is the bit that we're most heavily involved in. So so there was a project, I guess it was about 4 years ago, launched by Boris Johnson, and when George Eustice was the Environment Secretary, who we wrote to and got his support. So he plugged us into the DEFRA, Natural England, NHS, because it was teams from all three of them that were putting this together. And then we Surrey was part of that. Surrey County Council was part of that arrangement. So we got some funding from them and represented Surrey to the national teams. So I don't know if you know Dr. William Bird, who did this Walking for Health program, which I think has gone on to help millions. So he got an MBE. So he was one of the central gov team and turned into a big supporter of ours. So green social prescribing, and my wife's going to a meeting, I think this Friday, to the London Green Social Prescribing project, which Natural England's running. I spoke at it last year. And the guidance from the NHS, just in terms of what doctors. So if somebody comes into a doctor's surgery, the latest advice, there's like a will of advice. So whereas historically, if you went into the doctors and you said, I'm feeling, and they decided basically you were depressed or suffering from anxiety, then at that point, historically, normally the first point of call was medication of sorts.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Whereas now it's going in the more in the direction of patient self-determination, which is the bit that I love.
Yeah.
So if you go into basically a lot of doctors' surgeries now, they should have this will of advice, and they can say to people, well, if maybe you need medication, obviously in some instances, but if it's somebody that's just starting to experience things, they could say, well, rather than us going straight to medication, you want to try something like mindfulness.
Yeah.
So on the wheel of advice is mindfulness, and there's also join a walking group. So forest bathing combines two of those into a complex intervention is the term that universities call it, because what my wife and I set out to do, so our system's called Forest Bathing Plus.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
And that was a name given to us by the University of Essex.
Okay.
Because our intention was to create the most effective intervention for the NHS that could possibly be created, which is why we do the university research and we get huge amount. I mean, we've had we've had tens of thousands of people at our events, so we've trained hundreds of people, and we're training hundreds of people. So we get a lot of input from all of the events that they run and the feedback. And it all goes into constant improvements, combined with obviously talking to the government and the NHS about how this all needs to be put together. We work with sort of 40, 50 charities, lots of different government departments, all of the universities. So it's a constantly trying to improve it. But the bit that my wife and I bring to the party that's pretty unique on the planet is that we are yoga teachers. So a lot of the forest bathing systems are created by people coming from different directions. Yeah. But we are the only ones that we say, when people come to us to train as a guide, we say, okay, first, before we go into the forest and teach you about how to use the environment and how the environment helps people relax, first of all, we need to make sure you've got the meditation teaching skills. So we train people as meditation and mindfulness teachers. There are differences between mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Particularly the bit that we talk to people a lot about is informal practice. So being mindful during daily activities, and formal practice coming to a stop.
Yeah.
So which is traditionally seated. But it can be seated in a chair, etc. So first of all, we train people to be meditation teachers, And then over the top of their meditation teaching skill set, we teach them how to use the environment. So we give them our training manual to be a forest bathing guide. It's about 177 pages. So there's like, I don't know, 20 to 30 hours easily of sensory exercises.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you're never going to, the forest changes by the minute. Yeah, so the weather conditions and of course the time of year, the seasons change the forest. So you've got an ever-evolving, interesting environment, and so the exercises that you decide to use using your senses are always going to be different, just because of the conditions.
Yeah.
So it keeps it fresh and interesting.
Yeah, and then it's something that I find. Yeah, the forest is always different. It literally is always different. So yeah, I mean I'm conscious we're kind of running out of time. I just wanted to ask you before I kind of ask how people can get in touch with you, Gary, could I just ask for people that live in more kind of urban areas, is there benefit from, and maybe an ancient wood is not available, I don't know, someone in central London, for instance, is there benefit from kind of going to a park, some beautiful parks in cities, and kind of using the techniques in a park or another kind
Absolutely.
of green space? Yeah.
Yeah, we do teach people. There's actually the nature pyramid. Um, so yeah, you can say at the top of the pyramid, you're ancient, but you are better off, you could say for well-being purposes, having a plant in your apartment in the city than no plants. Just
Yeah.
any kind of nature contact is better than none.
Mm.
And so we should never dismiss any nature that we have at our disposals, whether it's street trees and just observing, enjoying the natural colors, which would be a bit softer, and the shapes can help us get away from this sort of stressed state of mind. Because the research we're doing this year is EEG. So looking at brainwave activity and nervous system. So that we've already done the equipment test. So looking at how the brainwave activity changes in these natural spaces.
Yeah.
So what I would say to anyone in the country, whether it's a small garden at your disposal or a little park, there are, as Professor Lee in Japan, who's our scientific advisor, Professor Lee says there are direct and indirect benefits. So if we are stressed, then it basically makes you can say our immune response work harder. And so if we go into nature, and the critical bit is if you go into your garden, if you go into into the park, or if you go into the woodland, with forest bathing, we are going into nature to enjoy nature.
Yeah, definitely.
Nature is generally used as a backdrop to another activity. This is not forest bathing. So it's walking and talking with a friend, entertaining the kids, running, cycling, horse riding, all of these activities raise the heart rate. So in forest bathing, what we're looking to do is lower the heart rate. So think of it as exercise for your nervous system.
Yeah.
The rest and digest, this parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, the restorative branch, and the soothing branch, which is the arm of our nervous system that we should all think about giving some TLC to, because the fast pace of modern life is effectively not giving it as much agency as it needs. So there is a cost to running around and being incredibly busy all the time. So we really need to try and find a bit of slower paced time. So even if it's 5 or 10 minutes at work during your lunch break or after work, if you can walk home via a park, walk home via a street that has some nice trees, and just stop,
be present,
pay attention, look. So when you're in nature, you're basically there. What are you interested in? What is the environment giving you where you are? And even just looking at the grass, whether it's the movement, enjoying like the nice vibrant shades of green. Now we're getting to spring, so lots of new life.
Beautiful.
And we're coming up to my favorite time of the year. Yeah, the birds are happier. Just listen to the sound of the birds when the sun's out. I mean, they sound happy to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how does that make me feel happy?
yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
That could be a game.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just in agreement with you. I mean, I read a lot of this research. I mean, I've read stuff like, I don't know, life expectancy in an urban street where there are trees is higher. People live long. I mean, there's so much evidence. And I guess it's, on some levels, it's obvious, isn't it? We're meant to be in a natural environment, aren't we? So being in a natural environment, which is our natural place to be, is going to be, is going to be good for us. I know that's massively kind of reductive. Gary, if people want to get hold of you for, all of the things that you do, and you also mentioned you've got a book coming out, how do they do it? How do they get in touch with you?
So, website would be the first point of call, which
Okay.
is Tango Foxtrot Bravo TFB.institute. My wife is very active on Instagram, so that's
Okay.
effectively a bit like our blog now, which is again, it's the same Instagram.com TFB underscore institute. So that's where we share a lot of tips for
Mm,
people. Again,
mm,
whether in the city or in the countryside, there's tips that people can
mm,
use, but it's also where we announce our latest research,
mm.
government findings. And yes, yeah, so I have to give my wife the main credit for
Okay.
the book, but the book, of course, contains a lot of the work that we've done everything together
Mm,
with this. Yeah, so the healing power of trees is due to be published this August. So yeah, we'll be giving
right.
a lot of talks.
Yeah.
Uh, and so there's a lot of tips in there for how people can do forest
Mm,
bathing, and of course
mm.
based on all the feedback we're getting from the hundreds of people we're training, because we're trying the main focus of our work is on making nature as accessible to everybody. So we don't dress it up in any fancy
Yeah.
language. There's not all this sort of language you'd hear in a yoga class.
Mm.
Nature's in potential effect to help all of us. I cannot stress enough the vital importance on a physical, mental, and emotional level.
Definitely. Yeah.
So yeah, anyone listening, yeah, just try and get out as often as you can when you can. And the data from the universities absolutely backs up
Yeah.
these benefits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I just made a note of the book. Yeah, I'll certainly be buying that book. Yeah, and I guess I mean, what we haven't talked about, and I know we've run out of time now, is because I guess it's so beneficial for the individual, but goodness me, this is really important for the planet as well, isn't it? To get people who are, I mean, certainly in the West, and it's probably true in many places of the world, we're so stepped away from nature. To try and get people to start connecting again with the natural world is so important, not only for their physical and mental health, but also for the planet. Because if people are
Mm.
present in nature, they're going to start, really, really kind of connecting with the importance of nature. And that, for obvious reasons, is incredibly important. So this is why such an important area, so important the work that you do, Gary. Before we finish, is there anything you would like to say to our listeners that I've not given you the opportunity to?
Well, I mean, I would like to pick up on that last
Yeah.
topic.
Okay.
So the two arms of our work is, yeah, obviously trying to help people and share the benefits that my wife and
Mm,
uh, I mean, we absolutely needed them. They've helped us and helped us through the most difficult periods of our life. And now I gave a talk to King's College. It was called The Value of Nature, their
mm,
symposium. And the title of my talk was basically the value of nature is priceless, because what I've heard and what I've
mm.
felt myself is that in our most challenging times and potentially our darkest hour, sometimes nature is the only one that's actually managed to help us somehow,
Definitely.
particularly with been a lot of people that have reported how nature can be helpful during grief, which
Yeah.
I've also heard firsthand.
Mm,
So that is one arm, and we've run
mm,
sessions for say 40, 50 charities and seen how nature can help the most vulnerable. We're on the BBC
mm,
with Reverend Kate Botley with young adults some of them had autism and learning challenges. I mean, it's just
Mm,
tear jerking and so heart moving.
mm,
And the other side of it is to preserve what little is left. So when we're talking about less than 2% of ancient
yeah,
woodland,
shocking.
the urgency, and I do implore everybody to try and help nature however they can. So whether from simple recycling
Mm,
behaviors to volunteering,
mm.
or doing whatever else there is in their hearts and minds to help nature, because she does need all the help she can
She does.
get at this point
Mm,
in time. We are a young species, and
mm,
we obviously we've developed all these amazing technologies, but we've separated ourselves from nature. Well, I've heard from
mm,
thousands and thousands of people that actually that wasn't the right thing for them. It can't be the right way for any of us, because our
no,
physiology um, is intimately connected. And as a
definitely.
father, I cannot think of anything else I would want to be doing now, knowing the urgency, like just measuring it on a species loss.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Species goes extinct, and yeah, I mean, I've been in the forest and looked at some of these little insects and the animals, how they move the heart and how actually meaningful
Yeah.
it feels to me at the time. And I think, well, if that goes for good, never to be seen again, if we obliterate it,
Mm,
it's gone, is gone.
mm,
And so I don't want that happen. I want as much of what is left available to my son and his children and
yeah,
their
yeah,
children, because
yeah,
it might reach them during their difficult
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
As well as the whole system is obviously interconnected, and we're in
Mm,
danger of the whole thing falling down like a house
mm,
of cards,
mm,
because yeah, we don't, the intricacies of the natural world. And I mean, I can give an example of a very
mm,
beautiful one.
mm.
Um, the short version is the bears in Canada um, leave the parts of the salmon by the river which are nitrogen rich, so they don't eat that part of the salmon. Well, the University of British Columbia have tracked this nitrogen as it rots into the bank of the river
Mm,
in Canada, and it's shuttled across through the fungal networks underneath the woodland floor, and you can trace it 15 to 20 miles into the forest. So the bears are fertilizing an area around the river, sort of a 40 miles square, right?
mm, mm.
Plus, so yeah, so what happens if you take away the bears or you take away the salmon? Suddenly 40 miles around this river have lost the fertilizer that's coming through the system.
Wow. Yeah.
But that's one connection that we weren't aware of until we found
Mm,
that. All of the species, of course, are all interconnected. And basically, if you think of it, all the
mm.
different species got all their different jobs, and they've got various jobs here, various jobs there, various jobs
Definitely.
there. And they're
Yeah.
all interconnected. And these jobs up here are connected to these jobs down here, and these jobs down here are connected to here. And here. So there's
Definitely.
all these interconnections, and it overlaps, and the play that
Mm,
we don't know that world. That world is a
mm,
world that we are mainly arrogant of.
mm.
So if we do not know the world of interconnections and how beautifully this system has been built up, it's a
Yeah.
bit like Lego bricks, right? All building up this
Definitely.
an absolutely incredible, beautiful picture. But if you don't understand how the picture was made, how can you then come in and start moving the blocks around? And what is the picture? So we come in and
Definitely.
move the blocks around, but
Mm,
the picture we created, rather than looking like something like the Taj Mahal,
mm.
just looks like somebody just put a load of blocks in a pile on the floor, and there is no, it's chaos.
No. No, and of course these systems have been, it's been thousands of years, and and I guess as human beings, we can't, all of this, history trying to command and take control of nature. And the big problem I think human beings have is we feel we're not part of nature. We feel we're somehow superior to the natural world, but of course we are part of the whole holistic system, of the earth, which I know is another place we could go. But Gary, we're gonna finish there. I could talk to you all
Okay.
day, but thank you so much for coming on the show. Maybe you'll come back at some stage because there's so much to cover. But it's
It'll be
been
delighted
lovely to
to.
meet you and really good to talk to you. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for your time and thanks everyone for listening.
And I'd just like to thank Gary so much again for coming on the show. I know I always say this really at the end of the show, but the time absolutely did fly. It's such an important area. So interesting to hear kind of Gary's backstory and all of the things he did, the kind of the spiritual exploration and also kind of exploring different places in the world and living and working there, which led him kind of into the area, into setting up the institute for forest bathing. All of the research continues to grow. We touched on a little bit of it today around the benefits of being in nature. And as we said at the end of the show, I mean, obviously, the world needs us to start reconnecting with the natural world because natural world is dying. I mean, just to put it really, really bluntly. This is why I always like to cover this area in every single series. So thank you again for Gary coming on. The signal was not great. It was a little bit kind of patchy today, the Zoom signal. So Joe and I have had a chat about it, and we could edit some of the freezing out, but we kind of felt it would really, really interrupt the flow of the interview. So we've decided to leave it in. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on one of our audio podcast platforms, then please do excuse some of the freezing. Sometimes that just happens, doesn't it, when you're working remotely over Zoom. But despite that, I thought it was a fantastic interview. I mean, Gary has so much to talk about, so much to offer. Perhaps at some stage we could have Gary back on the show. So I hope our listeners enjoyed that one. Coming up, got another show on Friday. The details of that I will have to give you a little bit later. I'm not entirely sure who the guest is going to be, but we're going to be putting out another one at the start of next week. Going to do the interview on Friday. So this is number 4. So we got plenty to go during this series. I'd also like to say if you are enjoying the show on the audio or the YouTube channel, then please do subscribe. It helps us a great deal when you subscribe. A lot of people listen to podcasts and don't subscribe. I do that myself. But if you could subscribe, leave some comments. I mean, as I've said before, Joe and I really, really love the comments. If there's anyone you'd like us to interview, if there's any subject you would like us to cover, then please do get in touch. We're really, really open to feedback. And just to say, as always, thank you to Joe for all the work he does behind the scenes. Joe's been quite busy connecting with guests. We've actually got quite a few really interesting guests coming on that Joe has facilitated them coming on the show. So, that's something really to look forward to. And as I always say at the end of the show, please look after yourselves, look after each other, and look after the planet. And thanks, as always, for listening. And I'll see you soon on the next episode.